it's really an honor to be here. I'm especially pleased to see so many young people here. It's really truly possible that many of the people in this room may apply for the U.S. Youth Observer program in the future, and we really are among people that will be future leaders at the UN. So it's an honor to be with you all, but especially for those young people that are here with your teachers today. I'd like to start by speaking a little bit about my involvement in my local chapter in Seattle. I first became involved with UNA 3 years ago when I was an 18-year-old senior in high school, and I heard that there was a unofficial UN delegation sponsored by the UNA Seattle chapter that was traveling for a month to Iran. And when I heard about this delegation, I thought to myself, what a shame that 60% of Iran's population is under 30, but there wasn't a single person on the delegation under 50. And so I got in touch with the leader of the delegation, who was a very active member in the UNA Seattle chapter, and I mentioned this to him just sort of in passing, and he heard what I had to say, and then the first thing that he said afterwards is, why don't you come on the delegation to Iran? And what started with this one small conversation with this UNA chapter member transformed my entire life. And not only did he invite me to participate in the delegation, but in 3 weeks, he helped me through the UNA network to raise $6,000 to travel with the delegation. And I started to receive checks and letters from UNA members that said that they wished me the best of luck on this delegation and that they wanted to support me, whether it was $10 or $50, or I even received a check from a UNA member for $500. This opportunity would not have been possible if it weren't for UNA. And I mention this just because I think it is indicative of all that is possible in terms of youth engagement and participation. Certainly, it may not be the case in your chapter that you send a young person to Iran, but every time a UNA chapter engages with young people, whether it's through Model UN or speaker series, it really has a dramatic impact in a young person's life. And so I'm very grateful to my local chapter and to all those who made that possible. And I think certainly my experience traveling in Iran prepared me very well for the U.S. Youth Observer position. One of the things that is the greatest strength of UNA is that we all serve as citizen diplomats through our travels, and oftentimes as citizens we're able to accomplish things that aren't necessarily even possible through the framework of our own government and through the UN. So when I traveled to Iran, I was one of few Americans that were able to be there and to talk to young people and to engage in citizen diplomacy at a time in 2010 when this was nearly impossible from a diplomatic level for most countries, and especially the US. So just to give you sort of a condensed timeline of my experience as the US Youth Observer, as was mentioned, it all started with a call from Patrick Madden asking me if I had any plans for the weekend because they wanted me to be in New York to be at the UN General Assembly as the first ever youth observer. And of course, nothing beats that, to say the least. And so I came down to New York and I spent really what was a whirlwind week interacting with heads of state, a variety of different people on the US delegation to the UN. And it's hard to pick highlights from the week because it was all a highlight, but one especially that I think of was my opportunity that I had to go to one of the most important panels on polio eradication in 25 years. And I remember walking into the room and walking up to the stage, and Bill Gates was on stage with the president of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nigeria. And I walked up to him and I said, I'm the US Youth Observer, and I'm from Seattle. And he just smiled at me, and we talked for a few minutes before he started his panel. And I mean, this is not, to be able to bring this type of story to young people across the country is really what's so incredible about this program. I often talk about the fact that I'm sort of the first degree of separation between American young people and these extraordinary leaders at the UN. And I don't take that role lightly. I think young people in this country have so much passion, so much enthusiasm, and all we need to do is tap into that. So whether it's in your chapter or in other organizations that you're involved in, just giving an opportunity to a young person is an extraordinary investment in the future of not only that person, but also in the world. Moving on from my week at the UN General Assembly, in October I spent a number of weeks here again, but this time I was joined by 40 other youth delegates from around the world. And this was a really extraordinary year for the UN Youth Delegate Program because there were some countries that sent youth delegates for the first time that had never sent them before. So there was a youth delegate from South Korea that spoke to the Third Committee about lack of access for disabled people to the internet in her country. There was 2 youth delegates from Kenya who for 3 years had lobbied their government to have a youth delegate program. And finally, they had been so persistent that this 18 and 19-year-old girl joined their delegation to come to the UN. So this was an extraordinary group of young people that I had the opportunity to work with. And my role was met with so much enthusiasm because this is the first time that the US is experimenting with this type of program. And so it was incredible, and we still work with each other on a constant basis, coming up with ideas for how young people can really have an impact at the UN. And during my week at the Third Committee, I had the opportunity to see all of the youth delegates address the committee on behalf of their delegation on a variety of different youth issues. And this is at the core of why it's important for young people to be engaged in the UN, because there are certain issues that disproportionately affect young people, as we'll see on the next panel about youth unemployment and education. And so it's really essential for young people to be not only a part of the conversation, but also to play a role in the decision-making process at the UN. And it's also was exciting in the past few weeks to hear that the UN has selected a UN focal point on youth, who will now serve as the sort of the person that represents youth at the highest level in the UN. And this was a position that was created by the Secretary General. And then in December, I also spent a week at the Department of State meeting with high-level officials such as the Assistant Secretary of State for International Organizations, Esther Brimmer, as well as Undersecretary of State Tara Sonnenschein, and just a variety of dozens of officials to report back on my experience and to give suggestions for how different agencies at the UN that work on a variety of issues can better engage young people. And I'm pleased to report that the State Department was very receptive to my being there. And I think that just shows that this is really a position that hopefully will continue in the future and continue to grow. And I actually just found out a few days ago that this Department of State is sending me to be the youth representative to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva for a week in March. And so these opportunities sort of grow upon each other, and it's almost hard to keep track of all of them. But it's really just shows the level of commitment that there is to engage young people in a meaningful way. And that is sort of the key word, is meaningful, because youth, we understand when we're being engaged in a meaningful process that we feel like we actually have a tangible effect on the outcome. So I think I will leave it at that, but certainly there is much more to be said about my experience. And again, I just hope that the young people that are here really feel like this is a position that is possible for them to attain, because I never thought that I would be the U.S. Youth Observer to the UN. It was really stunning for me to find out that I was selected. And every time that I engage with a young person, whether it's talking to local high schools in my hometown in Seattle, or with a group of young people at the U.S. mission to the UN from New York City, I'm so impressed by the way that young people work to change the problems that they see in their own communities, and that has a tremendous effect on the world. So I'm humbled every time that I have the opportunity to be with the young people that hopefully I represent well at the UN.